In this video, I'm going to be sharing 3 different ways you can decoupage candles with napkins, as well as a bunch of tips and tricks. First, let's talk about the supplies. Most importantly, you're going to need some candles. We're also going to be doing a LED one with a wax outer layer, and you're going to need a heat gun. Now, there's other ways you can do it. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I'm going to use a heat gun for this, and we're going to need this parchment paper. Parchment paper is for heat, so you want to make sure that you have this and not wax paper. The wax paper has that waxy film. Next up, pick your napkins. We're going to do a full coverage with this beautiful design, something I like to call patchwork with this pretty little piece. And we're going to use this one with the tan background to also do a full coverage. Make sure to remove all your wrapping from your candle, so this way you just have that waxy outer layer, and then cut down your parchment paper. I like to cut down new parchment paper for each candle decoupage I do because a little bit of wax usually gets on that parchment paper and it'll kind of stick on there. Now we want to get rid of all the sneaky layers on the back of our top decorative layer of our napkin. To do that, I usually just tear a teeny tiny corner and it reveals the extra layers, and then I just pull them off. We want to just work with that top piece. We're going to trim that down to size. Since we're doing a full coverage on this piece, I'm just kind of taking the candle, measuring it, making sure that it touches from end to ends. If it matters that the design matches up perfectly, make sure you cut yours so that it does. I took a minute making sure that the napkin was in the exact spot that I wanted it, and then I grabbed the parchment paper to gingerly wrap it around and get it nice and flat. If you want to take some painter's tape and tape yours down, you go right ahead. I do not do that. And I'll explain more about why I do what I do as we continue to carry on through the project. Now I'm going to take the heat gun and I'm going to pop it on the lowest setting and then gingerly start going over top of the candle with the heat gun. This is going to start to melt the wax underneath of the napkin. Now, napkins are porous, so that wax is going to seep up through the pores, which is exactly what we want. And you'll be able to tell when that happens because the napkin will turn translucent as this takes place. It can be difficult, and you'll see here in just a second, to be able to tell because you're using a white candle and a white napkin. But I try to get up on here so you can see just a little bit that the napkin is translucent in one section, and then in another section it's not. I'll continue showing you different variations as we go through the project. You'll notice I'm not putting the parchment paper back on, and that's just because I want to show you how it's melting. And I was realizing as I'm filming, I'm like, this might not be showing up so great. But see how I'm rubbing the candle as well? You're also going to notice that as you do this, it's possible to overheat sections of the candle and deform the candle. One thing I've noticed is whenever I tape that parchment paper down, it prevents me from being able to kind of rub out the sections, and leaving it loose allows me to rub and keep it round. So in the event that one section does start getting too hot and melting too far in or deforming the candle, I can just take my hand gingerly over the parchment paper and rub back and forth in the cylinder shape that the candle is and help keep it from doing that. When I have it taped down, I notice I'll like press with my fingers in sections I can see that it's not turning translucent, and then I'll have like bumps throughout the candle. So this method just works best for me. Take the information and use it or don't use it, completely up to you. Once I had the napkin completely on there, I grabbed my X-Acto knife to trim it up and make it look really neat. Now, this was a little bit of a wonky angle for me. I usually kind of lay it down flat on a table and then move the candle and cut, you know what I mean? But I was trying to show you guys how you can clean up those edges to make it look nice and fancy and professional. And if you notice any of the edges happen to pop up while you're doing this, just take the heat gun in that section and just kind of, melt it back on down. You do not need to seal over this. It is good to go. And yes, usually since napkins can be burned, it's safe to burn your candles with the napkins on there. I wouldn't recommend doing that with decoupage tissue paper or rice paper, but napkins I have not had an issue with. For this decoupage candle, we're going to do something I like to call patchwork. First up, we're going to need to just tear off a little corner of our napkin here and peel off all those sneaky layers. We're just going to be using the top decorative layer for this piece. To do a piece like this, I highly recommend finding a napkin like this, where you see there's a bunch of little designs that don't actually touch, so you can tear out little sections and use them individually to create what I like to call the patches, the little patchwork pieces. For this, I wanted to keep it super simple. You could absolutely tear it as many as you would like. I'm just going to use this one little piece right here. We're going to make sure we cut out our parchment paper to fit over this, cut out a new piece of parchment paper and put it right over top of our napkin. When you're happy with everything, grab your heat gun, turn it on the low setting, and then just go over top of that parchment paper. You can take your hand, do a little rub to make sure that the napkin is down. And if you notice, like here, I noticed there was a little section in the corner that wasn't completely melted in, just went back over it, took the parchment paper and did a little bit of rub. You can absolutely trim your napkins down as much as you would like. It's always a pain in my butt too. So for these, I don't mind leaving excess napkin. They usually melt right in and match the candle perfectly. You can't tell. Because I know people always have opinions, we're going to bring on in the iron for this demonstration. I'm going to put it on low, and then I'm going to show you why using an iron to decoupage on a napkin is not my preferred method. The prep work is the same. Make sure you got the sneaky layers off, got a nice clean piece of parchment paper. Make sure your iron is heated up, and then place the parchment paper over the candle just like you would if you were doing the heat gun, okay? Now here's where the difference comes in. We're pressing on this candle with pressure. The candle is melting. Yes, it's melting up through the pores in the napkin, but guess what else is happening? We're deforming the candle. It's been my experience. I cannot count the amount of candles I have decoupaged at this point in my life. Not just like this, but with Mod Podge and different things. And this is not my favorite way. You can do it. It works. But it's not the cleanest preferred method. You can see how inside of the napkin here, there's wax pushing up over top of the candle. So when you go to clean this up, it's going to be fairly messy to clean it up. You're also, if you rub your hand over your candle as you're doing this with the iron, you're going to notice there's going to be different indents. There's also something else that takes place with this that does not with the heat gun, is there's a ton of extra residual wax that comes through those pores, and it's left, look at that, all over the parchment paper as well as the surface of our candle. I don't have this. You see me with my hands on the other projects where I'm just back and forth. It's nice and smooth. That surface is buttery smooth. I do not have this experience with the iron. Again, this works. It absolutely works. But to me, there's a lot of cleanup in the back ends. Absolutely use whatever ideas work best for you. There is no right or wrong way to do this. It is just what works best for you. And this is not my preferred method, people. For this decoupage candle, we're going to be using one of Dollar Tree's LED candles. Now, I recommend if you're going to do this to an LED candle, make sure it has the wax on the outer layer, okay? Get all the sneaky layers off of your napkin. So we just have the top decorative layer, and then trim that napkin down. Now, if you have LED candles that are completely plastic and you want to decoupage them, you can also do that, but you're going to want to use Mod Podge. Don't bring in the heat gun or anything like that. That's a whole different technique. For this video, we are just doing the wax, and we're using the heat gun with napkins. No mediums necessary here. Just for safety's sake, make sure before you start heating up your candle, you take any batteries out that are inside. One thing I love about a tan napkin or cream napkin in any sort of way when you're decoupaging onto a background like wood or a tan candle or anything like that, it just blends flawlessly. You don't need to paint anything, just is what it is. Just like if you're doing a white background with a white napkin, it blends. You get the same effect here. And on this candle, you can really see the translucency coming through as this napkin just melts right on into this candle. Now, don't go getting wild like I am here and have your napkin just flapping in the wind. I'm trying to share with you guys how this is just, seeping up through the napkin, then rubbing to, attach everything. If you're new to this, absolutely make sure you're keeping that parchment paper over. I'm just doing this for demonstration to share how it's solid color and how it's translucency, since you can see it so amazingly. And I will tell you, it roughly takes me about 10 minutes to do this to a candle. It's not a quick thing. It takes some time and patience. So give yourself some grace, especially if you're trying this for the first time. If you're looking for more decoupage projects or tips or information, check out this playlist right here. And as always, people, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. And until next time.